Thanks for joining me on episode 494 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I challenge you to invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world by using your time, your talent, and your treasures to live out your calling. Having the ability to really find your gifts and calling is a key. And one way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast by my friend Scott Mader.
When in reality needs to be now. When are you going to begin taking action? When are you going to carve some time out in your day to actually be working on something? When are you going to begin to take a tiny, small step? Welcome and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world. In today's episode about impacting the world through stewarding your talent, I talk with you about why the questions what and how aren't really the important questions, why instead when and why are way more important, and why asking these questions will help you grow. You've heard me talk about developing your talent, and one of the best ways to do that is through books. But if you're like most people today, it's hard to find the time to read. And that's why today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Go to inspiredstewardship.com/audible to sign up, and you can get a 30-day free trial. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from, and you can pick one and listen your way to developing your talents via Audible. That's inspiredstewardship.com/audible to get your free trial and listen to great books the same way you're listening to this podcast. All too often, when we're thinking about our calling, when we're thinking about what we want to be when we grow up, when we're thinking about those things that we want to do, we begin to ask ourselves questions. Maybe we ask them out loud. Maybe we write down the answers. Maybe we just ask them in our own head and begin to dwell on them. And more often than not, one of the first questions that we tend to ask is what? What is it that we're going to do? What's the next step? What action should I take? What should I do to move forward and begin to live out my calling? Beyond that, we begin to think about how. How am I going to do that? How am I expected to do this? Am I even somebody that others will listen to? What kind of person begins to think that they can do this, that I'm not worth it? In fact, we begin to question ourselves. We begin to have self-doubt. We begin to worry that if we do something, it's going to be the wrong thing. It's going to move us in the wrong direction. We get so bogged down in trying to figure out what is the right, perfect thing to do. What's the perfect thing to do, and how should we do it so that it works perfectly and we make no mistakes and we have no pain? But the truth is, those two questions, what and how, are really not important at all. Instead, the questions you should be asking are why and when. And even why is a question you have to be careful about. Why questions? Why are you doing it? Why should you be the one that does that? It can often lead you down a rabbit trail of really questioning yourself. It can cause a lot of confusion if you're not careful, but the why often really has more to do with what's the purpose behind what you're doing. Why are you going about doing it? And you do need to have an emotional connection to the goal. You have to have a reason to do it. a deeper reason, a drive, something that's going to keep you moving even when it gets hard. Because guess what? It is going to get hard. So when I ask about a why, I'm not asking about some sort of deeper purpose. I'm asking about an emotion. People come and they want to get out of debt, and they talk about what they should do and how they should do it. But what I try to help them dig into too is, why do they want to get out of debt? What's the purpose behind it? What's the emotion behind it? What is it that's driving them towards that? Is it that they want more freedom? Is it they want more flexibility? Is it they want more safety? Is it they want something around the emotion of giving and caring for others? That's what I mean when I say you need a little bit of a why. How questions can limit you. They can make you start looking for answers. What questions can really get you stalled down as you try to figure out the perfect things to do? And why questions are somewhat dangerous, but you do need to uncover some emotion. But the single most important question you can ask is, when? We talked a little bit about this yesterday on the time episode, but when are you going to do it? When are you going to take action? If you begin to answer things like someday or not right now or when I'm ready, that's the wrong answer. When, in reality, needs to be now. When are you going to begin taking action? When are you going to carve some time out in your day to actually be working on something? When are you going to begin to take a tiny, small step? And it doesn't matter what the step is. It doesn't matter how you go about doing it nearly as much as it matters that you begin to take action. If you just get a little bit teeny bit better every single day, if you just take a small action every single day, and even if most of the action is wrong, if a tiny bit of it moves you in the right direction, then you're still making progress. You're still moving forward. You're still growing. You're still making progress towards doing the things that you're supposed to do. You can easily make excuses. There's always something to keep you from starting. Well, when my job calms down, then I'll get started. Well, when the family situation calms down, then I'll get started. Well, whenever things get better at home, whenever I'm not having to volunteer quite as much, whenever the kids get older, someday I'll get started on it. Instead, carve out a little bit of time. Put it on your calendar. Block it out. Even if it's 15 minutes a day every single morning. Even if it's 30 minutes once a week. Even if it's an hour on Thursday evening where instead of watching Netflix, you work on your business and your dreams. You work on growing. You work on developing yourself. You work on pouring in some time and energy towards moving towards your bigger goals. I guarantee you, you will make more progress in the next month than you've made in the last year if you haven't been doing this. So ask yourself the important question. When are you going to do it? It's just like the old proverb. When's the best time to plant a tree? The answer is 20 years ago. But when is the second best time? Today. So get started planting your dreams today. Thanks for listening. Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you like this episode on the stewardship of talent, you can go over to inspiredstewardship.com/talent and sign up for our 5-week series on the stewardship of talent. Or if you're in the U.S., you can text 44222 talent tips. That's talent tips to 44222 and get those tips. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures, develop your influence, and impact the world.